Hello, dear Rupert Murdock and Norm Chomski. You guys are brilliant men. But for example, hyper-linguistics exists. What is hyper-differentially true? We could even show how hyper-formulaic exists, where and how the identity of the ground's identity is coming to itself, since before it was physically manifest. How science reveals this. The identity of the chicken came before the egg. Well, for example, you are an identity now that is with and as the identity you were when you were a baby, but you no longer are. That part of your identity is gone. You can't make and be more and more forever nature, which everything can only be, as space/existence, where the slash is an increasing identity of volume, /s, where and how are the parts of one complete hyper-possession over all parts of space/existence is one identity of volume. Its identity of volume's relationship to itself, and the value of that are three distinct hyper-invisible, but still discernible bodies of volume. And they are bound, individually grouped, bound as an individual volume, again, that we can only discern properly with correlation, how we actually think, by using what is hyper-simultaneous discernment, for example, as that which all three parts. You could say that a cell nucleus, cell body, and cell wall, those are three distinct identities of the same identity, as 1/3/5 identities of sequence /simultaneous nature. And this is where and how the hyper-simultaneous nature's identity of relationship to itself. Its identity of volume as value equals. See, this is where volume equals value as nature / nature as value. English was revealed to teach this by a sophistication that abridged scientists since semi-ancient times could not defend themselves, and everyone at law locations can't defend their positive and negative treatments, identity treatments, and not self-value, that which was original collusion at all locations, that no one, there was sophistication before countries A through Z. It was complete possession over every identity of sophistication / non-sophistication. And the slash is also where and how it is three distinct identities of exception nature are manifest, because of where and how the value of its identity of hypervolume, its identity of hypervolume's identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that is actually manifest. For example, so many needs to discern its identity of conjunction /s simultaneously, to where and how we are one body as species, one body grouped, ages, areas, sexes, such differences that are all in demonstration of the hyper-difference. What is actually hyper-exception nature? See, we could be other systems, we could make exceptions, but nature's going to continue to demonstrate this. And a breaching method knew that nature would continue to demonstrate it. And it effectively made self-value where it counts, where and how we are fact-sheet nature, where and how we are syntax nature, therefore not just function. Because there are three hyperfunctions. Its identity as volume, its identity of relationship to itself as volume too, because it has a direct hypercorrelative relationship to everywhere, differentially especially, and where and how it is value, and where and how it begins and stays about the invisible but still discernible, and the hyper-conjunctions to all conjunctions, to all parts of English grammar. It is greater than, and what is more finite than, the most finite parts of temporary / lasting, forever nature. Nature being an identity of relationship to positive and negative simultaneously, where more and more positive can be made here. The way it does it, the way that is observable. It's a science that never parts from where its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that are 3 volumes that are only increasing. And that's observable only by using what is simultaneous. And the science of that requires the sophistication to discern what is hyper-simultaneous. This discerns physical delusions with the people using with the uses of linear algebra, for example, and with math and defenses of it. Therefore, as nature is offensively, increasingly self-valuing problems at all other ages of campuses, and or contentment with that which is originally instilled, incapable of defending itself and ourselves at the same time from the nature of the sophistication of the breaching method, singular, that was sustained to point out and to note and to observe all that to where and how breaching methods were motivated, roles, qualities of fact, cheap nature, defending themselves, identities of names, titles, locations, subjects uses, sciences uses, sense and sensibilities, use Jane Austen's phrase, sense and sensibilities. We could just use the singular, the words or the phrases of an author without even having to read them. How? Because we could know a prior. So we have to change the definition. A prior, they have theoretics. They have the theoretical, entertained with and as the sense and sensibilities of the sciences abridged, the Constitution abridged. George Washington, for example, they want our founders and what they were about, where everyone wanted to have a soul and free speech, and not have to entertain theaters that you couldn't entertain, and defend what was complete remote possession over all locations, areas, and states, standing natures of criminal insidious natures, mass wrongdoers, sustained until their predicate acts rolls, with things like slavery. It's hyper-evidential. There are revelations where and how they brought up witch trials all this time as a subject separated from what slavery is about. Offensively, so we have victim predators that are offensively sophistication / non-sophisticated, people that hate each other, kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, find active progressive lies. So the executive counsel of the F.B.I., also the lawyer of former director of the F.B.I., Robert Luskin, is involved with people in a 2006 district court case, is also involved with having coordinated before that and after that roles with predicate acts in all different cases, because they've been roles with this that has the sense and sensibilities, again use that phrase, of people that don't even know others, and they were influenced to set up exceptions so they could pretend others are liars, where and how for example, the right to lie, the quote, right to lie, unquote, quoting James Comey, as reported by the news, I believe Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. I believe I watched that on CNN or Fox News. So first I was trying to limit it because I just wanted to and needed to report So, for example, there's this is on-off Fox Connecticut News, and I'll sue that. I'll sign that I won't sue you if you just help me, Mr. Murdock, because there are police families from my town involved with the Wethersfield Police, on-off that Hartford location and locations next to it through time, involved with a whole bunch of natures of identity thefts and frauds, wire crimes, mail crime rolls, falsified police report rolls. As wire crimes, as police families, they switch names, falsified police reports. Also with the same houses and one on my street. Since I was a kid, involved with various natures of judges, it's either lying to the judges, but also with some of them, because they already had the investigators tied to them. They've been using everything that came with them. In other words, our founders left us to demonstrate how all locations, areas, and states and sciences were left abridged. They couldn't entertain what they were doing to survive. They were enslaved, sickly distinctly. Our founding parents, what correlation reveals, actually, honestly, is the interpretation of what they wanted us to say for themselves, is that and how they did not have free speech. Every individual grouped and all together, everyone was maintained in nature. That was either insidious natures of positive and or insidious natures of negative, and all exceptions, the exception nature kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, finite, active, progressive life, increasingly to and as the value of the uses of all identity, the ground locations, where the invisible is, though. Where the invisible but still discernible. This is where it had the complete possession. See, this is where and how, in other words, but we know about math, we know about the, we know about the economics variables. There are nuclear weapons involved. The variables, it's hyper-evidential that there were through lifetimes. We had critical needs to address, also simultaneously recorded how all identity ground from here, from countries A through Z, all suburbs, all exceptions and demonstration, the same thing, tactically denatured, let alone the urban areas. And the means to one of these systems at the same time. All we have to do is admit that A through Z, then it changes the nature of everything. Okay, well now we were about to go to war because you guys are in sick positions. You have humanity. I was talking to, not you guys. So you guys were preventing me. The courts have recorded themselves involved with juxtaposed natures of child abuses. There's a video about they're giving treatments about, in other words, they're pretending that they go equally for all victims, but the victims are recorded consciously in the backgrounds, personally, and with overt criminal enterprises, people next to body dumping spots, and through time kept increasingly needed to hide the same lies, uses of them pretending passions and emotions, pretending to like and or not like or be neutral to people. Where, in other words, they're forcing us to use other people's names. They interbranch. But we can't leave out how. And they're brought up too. They bring things up. They make confessions. Then all exceptions, they try to switch and pretend other too. They want to have debates in courts that have been switching names and forging names, leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since. I don't know Heather Hansen. I only know her from confessions, demonstrations recorded. She was involved with men and women from Central Connecticut State University, where I don't know what grammar school she went to. I never saw her in middle school on my campus ever. And we didn't have we had at a different school, the middle school class. She was in a summer school class with me. They were involved with judges and prosecutors. And a whole bunch of other countries involved with people that were in my classes. I went to 9 campuses in my life. First one I had that was great. Maybe 3, but I'm saying the second one, I saw good all the way through. But what they did was and what they do is make strangers pretend they knew you, pretend they know you. And they made exceptions, they filmed them, and they pretend they communicated with you before that. They're always lying about what came before that, and they're just filming fake things. Because the subject here is where and how, outside of courts, the World Trade Center in Washington, D.C., originally still criminally foreign influence, when they say George Washington owned slaves, he said, get the Constitution unabridged. They had to hide their roles with James Madison's plan. With uses of, the people that run the prisons, all private, tied to the interbranch, on and off the state judicial branches, on and off the state prison department offices, right on the edge of Wethersfield/Hartford. No. The recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the intelligence community originally still. Delusions wrought and simultaneously criminally foreign influence premises treatments, increasingly self-valued. Increasingly, they have to self-value at all locations. People like pretending that protest or the right to assemble is about holding up a sign. They're offensively forcing qualities of fact-cheating nature that, if defended, can't defend themselves from the sophistication that exploited. No, science, you have to hide lies, physical delusions. You have to hide criminally foreign influence premises treatment, self-value. You have to hide remote uses of that for their own person self who wants to hide that, who wants to pretend other. And I mean, not you guys, the one who wants to pretend other. But so they have you guys wanting and needing to pretend other. For example, if someone tries to report simple predicate acts or sequence shifts, not even naming them, just trying to report the sequence shifts, police switching and forging names. They're also lying about their motivations, or also the evidences here. Because their excuses, their uses are juxtaposed with other worse. They'd rather be known and thought, there are people that would rather be caught for or blamed on other things when they're going through the processes with the trials and with the interbranch, when their interaction, and because of the roles with the uses of the locations. So there was two Mendez police, and there was the main family that is involved also on off religious locations and schools further with a principal child defender, abuser. Now, even if that was made up about with roles with upskirts and people with the policing of the stores, there are two people with the name Jerry Kerr, and there's a John DeMorrow. There's a bunch of people with the name Joe DeMorrow, and there's a Paula DeMorrow. And they have generations of their family involved with a whole bunch of people like a Joe Aiello, who was involved with predicate acts on and off the campuses, and not realizing, and maybe as wrongdoers or whatever, but as natures of identity theft frauds roles, also with a former Mayor Gold and other mayors that are involved with in processes. This is where they have the sort of, quote, sense and sensibilities, quote, unquote, of people in backgrounds pretending passions and emotions, where and how they have remote uses of investigators originally still also as our subject /S. When they, for example, what is slavery? Remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of people. What is witch trials? Even if it was made up, and differentially, especially if it was made up, which also shows there is something that is differentially special there, and it's differentially especially critical if one wants to speak for and use sciences. So there are rape threats and other passions crimes that were used to effectively force more names recorded then and now involved with the principal child abusers role campuses. These are people that are involved with the government where they have needs to stay with their roles with the various natures of drugs and those kind of people. But see, they've been using them to hide their lie progressions, where and how their identities of sophistication and non-sophistication were simultaneously used remotely, originally, and still. So they've been lying to a black female judge, for example. I did a whole bunch of ways. In other words, to discern this, we have to get their names on paper, because they switch names also. There's former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, people from Washington, D.C., and from World Trade Center, people with the Justice Department. They already locked themselves, painted themselves to opinions and convictions in cases that can't defend it. They were made victim predators, only capable of defending logic that way. Only defending roles with the recorded parts of it, like the remote uses of the investigations investigator, overt criminal enterprises. Dear John Scully, too, please give me a name to respond, because they use all the Wethersfield gyms. I mean, all the gyms. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed right before the World Trade Center attack. They took collusion with the natures of child abuse that the interbranch and the foreign had on my street, differentially criminally with the same names. Because there's an O'Brien family that took collusion with the F.B.I. and CIA. Also involved criminally with a former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, and with the officers who've been forging in names and switching names on a whole bunch of fake police reports, and they haven't been giving me writings since before the World Trade Center attack. And while they're stacking fake things in databases, so they're sequence shifting and pretending other with their treatments of Judge Napolitano, and with their remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of the online platforms that also then they extended that, have them personally criminally involved. I don't know this. I don't know if she had brothers, sisters, where she lived. I don't know anything about her. Well, what's her name? I think she has something to do with veterinary too. And for example, people that they made exceptions by knowing where I was going to be, and I only saw them one time. They got the sense and sensibilities of people intercampuses, needed to hide lie progressions of the people at the, like when I was in grammar school, on and off campuses. It was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed how the branches of government. I didn't know about the judicial branch yet. I mean, it's implied, but I mean, I didn't think, oh, that's it. I just realized that, and how, which is in relationship to where and how people want to have charged properly the predicate acts and the wrongdoers and the criminal and seditious natures that were involved with things like slavery and witch trials, simultaneously hyper-relevant, because that's how we study what is hyper-simultaneous. So no, they never yet the conjunction between physical conjunctions like but or and simultaneously what a conjunction is also is a nature, a correlative conjunction, a coordinating conjunction, and another identity of hyper-invisible but one way is also present there. And it is where it is, now how it is value to itself, where and how simultaneously we are only hyper-positive to ourselves when going by its system. And syntactically, they're so functionally. See, but what was in his entertained, private, interbranch, overt criminal enterprises, and transnational ones, hundreds of nations criminal enterprises, archetypal criminal enterprises, in a semi-ancient trap, but as a semi-ancient trap, as locations, areas, and states, natures of criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments, simultaneously can't defend themselves and us at the same time. The sciences share an identity. So this was too first sustained against the Native Americans. The first thing that we have to do is admit that predicate act delivery system against everyone at once, but it was first sustained against them. And other was his told. And they're pretending and needing motivations for those reasons known. Greed, ignorance, delusions. But everyone's missing remote uses of that was his worse. And while that was being sustained, and while it is being sustained, much worse was his manifest. I tell it best, boxing. So they have even campuses, whether they have that in their curriculum or not, critical race theory. They have they have Connecticut State Media, people next to Fox Connecticut News, people next to WFSB. They have people in the past make confessions as strangers. A whole there's a Sandra Spada, and Antonetta Spada. I don't know their mother's name and the other sister's name, and there's a Joe Spada. I never met him. There is a Judge's family. There's a Delafair family that had them make confessions so they could pretend to know me, and they had a Ray Colo asked me a whole bunch of times if I messed around with her, if he slept with her. I don't know what the question was. I never had anything to do with her. They made it. The only reason I know her from was a whole bunch of different people had her as their boyfriend. At the same time, those people were involved with these ones on and off the news with identity thefts and frauds. Then they're pretending passions and emotions now as adult, distinctly as in backgrounds too, because they can't speak to me as they don't know me. And the only exception nature in the past, if they tried to put that on paper, it would show that. It was recorded a whole bunch of ways. And there were a whole bunch of names they brought into it, let alone their own. They even have the Weathersfield police chief confess, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed to me and others through time. And this is one with the same house. They have a Cololo family and a whole other families with that name. They're trying to start fights with me and my neighbors and everyone else and their neighbors. And though they're also exploiting if people ignore stuff because they're keeping things, they already have painted themselves, delusions, uses of criminally foreign influence premises, uses of exception nature they can't afford, but the self-value rolls with the uses of all locations that are fact-cheating nature oriented, uses of corners of streets. This method new. This method that's set up Weathersfield and the suburbs of modern nations came before we were countries. And when they came as countries, our founding parents didn't have free speech. They had to speak. They had to use short words that were entertaining locations, areas, and states distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously criminally foreign influenced. So forcing entertained natures of logic that couldn't defend themselves and us from what is and was and has been through time offensive tactical degradation of human education. They are preventing proper they also have interculturally people culturally charged offensive involved with the identity thefts and frauds, so they can't defend themselves and speak about culture properly. And so this is where they increasingly are, everyone too, valuing theory in place of science. But science is not supposed to use theory. That's what we're taught up front. So they're measuring and maintaining too. Needs to hide how they already used and use each age of each. They use the generations of each family against themselves without wanting to be. Because in other words, everyone's being attached to fake words, fake locations, fake sequence relationships, fake ties to complete strangers, even at the younger stages, fake natures of ties to people. And that is because there are conjunctions. It was worse than this. When people see it, they're going to see it, discern it through the conjunctions intercities between the campuses. and where and how that becomes and stays manifest with the confessions, which are also in the forms of statements, because they have the kids of the overt criminal enterprises, of the private ones, and of the interbranch and of the other country. They want to pretend that their parents' logic is sane, but obviously sane logic, and America. No one even defended why and how our founding parents had to hide their rules, therefore pretend to entertain natures of positive and negative treatments, identity treatments that couldn't defend themselves and afford counter to what they actually wanted us to need to counter. So they have remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of the online platforms. I use that word for them before I heard anyone else using it, too, by the way, because there's a DeMauro family that people from Central Connecticut State University, students and professors, recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed people associated with them, involved with identity thefts and frauds, fake ties to me, fake natures of ties to me, and they used exceptions to pretend others. And in other words, they're not legitimately with the intelligence community. They're not legitimately the courts with the locations next to the campuses. And this is why across the board of countries, since before cars, that scale of infrastructure from a tactically denatured base is still self-valued. You're still even entertained. They'll go, oh, how could the Egyptians have built so well? See, we need to get on the same page. And we have to use science as actually inherent active progressive means. And that requires uses of the value of sequence truth. So the courts and the police forms, they've been forging and switching names, they've been wire crimes and falsified police reports at locations so they could hide what they've been doing on, and if someone's talking about it online, it's going to give them up, so they have to hide that. It has something to do. So this is also, dear Miss Berger Sweeney and Elizabeth, please tell Elizabeth that she was lied to about me, and that Joshua Straker, I never had anything to do with him. They tried to make an exception one time. People made all these confessions, demonstrated in other words, so they could go back, and then no one could be honest. In other words, they have Eric Oliveri involved with shipping drugs and as roles with the different kinds of drugs. These are courts and people supposed to be against drugs that have been attaching people to fake ties to their kids and their drug cliques. The ones that are supposed to be, they're not legitimately with, because it also has roles with how they're with a whole bunch of people on the campuses. I don't care. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Those people as strangers, that's why they had to make, there's a pattern. Then years later, I didn't know the men, they're making connected confessions about roles with an untimely death on Trinity College with the ones on my street. Also with a Rob Rodriguez who made roles about with that, with my neighbors. And with some police forms involved in other locations intercity, as the people involved on off Trinity College in Hartford that were also involved on off CCSU. That, in other words, they were being used remotely and are being used remotely. There are police chiefs from my town, their family members and people intimately tied to them 1 year ago, involved also predicate acts on my street, and attached me to fake words. NBC Connecticut News attached me to fake emails. They did that so they could change the conversation, hide what was actually recorded. The guy left a whole bunch of messages on our answering machine. A principal, child abuser, and confessions when the Rob Rodriguez brought up the school to me. And there's also a Scalora family involved with intelligence and foreign and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and with the military, foreign and domestic, involved with identity thefts and frauds. And we're trying to make exceptions because the roles also with falsified police reports and predicate acts and cases, lying to judges, lying with some of the other ones, various natures of courts personally with their family members and generations of their families criminally involved with syntactic and names uses with people on my street, sense and sensibilities uses. They have problems now because you guys are playing these games in the background, and with this Tim O'Brien, Andrew O'Brien, and people with Sandy Hook, Newtown, involved with the campuses in Wethersfield, intercities too. People on off a CCSU connected campus on Franklin Avenue and businesses next to it involved with a Scalora family, involved with the intelligence community that is criminally foreign influence, actually, per their roles with identity thefts, fraud, slanders too, because that's relevant to where and how the value part goes with it. And again, where there is hyper-relativity to where and how there are questions that correlation has and discorrelation, where they are increasingly valued that teach to us what was simultaneously true about which trials were, when and how. What is actually recorded, they separated that subject from slavery, and they separated because they have slavery too blamed on. They have blamed on theories that are that can't defend themselves, and us from what exploits their theories and qualities of fact, treatment, nature. Then they have to offensively value sense and sensibilities, pretending it's personal. If we say their delusions rotten, so that's why we need to have things in writing. But the courts have offensively been. New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts are involved with a whole bunch of people tied to Mendez police, involved with the buildings next to Fox Connecticut News. And these are also people on and off the state judicial branch offices, on and off the state prison offices, and on and off the middle school, further with a Dr. Graham, and with people with forensics locations, involved with some people associated with the boxer named what's his name? John Scully, because he's got roles with some guy near. There's a body dumping spot /S reported tied to Billy Grasso. This is also where and how the news has rights to lie and journalists have rights to lie, where they've been exploiting exceptions and self-valuing that, but for motivations other than what motivated it. Because also their motivations are also being used to screen what is involved here, everything. So they also attached me, Connecticut News, to fake words about the World Trade Center with myself and with others. There's also a Leahy family of doctors, generations in their family of doctors involved with drugs and medicine crimes. And these are people with courts that in police firms that speak sequence shifts, fake things. They brought up psychedelics, and then they pretended I had something to do with it. On typing that onto YouTube or typing that onto Facebook, I forgot which one it was. They also have an Ian up the street, and neighbors of his. They involved with identity thefts and frauds. I never had anything to do with Ian. His neighbors pretended they knew me because of their roles intercities, also with the journalists criminally involved. And the campuses, intercampuses, identity thefts and frauds cliques. They make arrays of people that will tell you, but if you keep asking them, they don't know me. I don't know them. And how they'll tell you that they were influenced, and it will be shown how they were actually influenced to pretend exceptions in some of the cases, which is also relevant because the only reason I know this Joshua Julian's name, besides online afterwards, is from years when I was young. His name used to be confessed to me when I would see, for example, too, when a Paul Zanin would be around my neighbor, one of the Ray Cololos, brought up by the police with this. And these are the courts, too, that have been fabricated. I had to write a complaint about a Judge Smith when I was a kid. But that wasn't big enough and it wasn't finite enough because to counter, of a description of how bad he was and is being used with the identities of the branches of government individually grouped together. There are also people that worked for and as a Trantolo and Trantolo, who is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, delusions, raw, criminally foreign influence, roles with wire crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, making up conspiracy theories about others, and pretending other people make conspiracy theories to them as their means to force childhood, and their roles having forced and forcing child abuses. They're mixing natures of crimes here. Then they self-value natures of types of experts who are going to defend themselves and their authority, where their authority is employed, sick, fake. It can't defend itself, so it defends, well, this is what we were told to do. But, we're supposed to rely, we don't care about their processes. They're not even supposed to tell us about that. But that's what they end up doing, because everyone speaks through other people, and yet they have been preventing me writing since I was a kid. I still didn't get a response. I can't work now. They have deans of colleges and their kids. Then they involved with this. And again, what is recorded, the only reason we're going to bring up the different natures of crimes is because their uses of them and the uses of that by a breaching method. They brought this up. So there were a whole bunch of natures. There were also religious crimes. I remember crimes. There were uses of the words crimes, for example. Their uses of words. There are hiding sequence shifts. These are people that attach me and others that were in the World Trade Center attack context, not in the attack, but right before it. Right before it. The same ones leading up to it, in that context and since, recording with the investigators of it too. The same ones that were criminally foreign influenced. The same ones that they forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded people from the other countries to self-value roles with them, with crimes with forensics locations, with crimes with investigators, the training of them, like Central Connecticut State University. You'll see, Gary Sasso confirmed, demonstrated, recorded this is true. And he doesn't know that the extent of that. I shouldn't have to. You guys brought this up, and this is also with people associated with Gail King. It's also recorded true. Roles with WFSB, and they start these fights. And they attach me to fake raising my voice, and they pretended I was silent for reasons. They're preventing people offensively, not just their rights in courts, but they're offensively they're fabricating audio and video. They're fabricating evidences while they're hiding increasingly their roles where they live and with their friends. We're even painting fake hiding exculpatory evidences, painting fake inculpatory evidences, pretending to care about. So we have increasingly self-valued the real causes of all the identities of values of negative value nature, progressive action nature through time. What really caused the shootings in New York City, Hartford, Connecticut. The things that happened in Wethersfield. And they have these roles with the people playing games with the smoke and with the religious parts of it brought up with the fire departments and with this Domain family and the others who are right on the outside of Fox News connected in Hartford, Connecticut. And they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed also by others that could. These are the ones that pretended conversation with me as police, these Mendez brothers. And with other agencies, so as police forms, but they're involved with predicate acts, and they've been hiding